All right, we are back with another video in our PCF Basics course. Today we're going to be covering our Intro to React. And yeah, Charles, how you doing today?
Fantastic as always, Garrett. Looking forward to it.
Great. So glad to hear it. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to kind of take the lead today. We'll go ahead and cover some basics of React. Starting off, we've got our hello. Well, we've got sort of built out like we had it last time. We had this component with a number of smileys that would change when we change stuff. Um, Most specifically, this input right here. And today we're going to actually make this more React-y. React is kind of one of the standards in the web world for building reactive user interfaces. Yeah, it's all over the place. Microsoft loves it these days. And it's kind of the de facto way to build reactive PCFs as well. So we're going to go ahead and use that to make a more reactive and more useful PCF. Starting off, one of the first things we have to do is actually import the React library into our component code. So we'll just do simply enough import all as React from React, and now we've got access to that library within our code. And then we're going to actually build out an interface, which interfaces are a feature of TypeScript. Um, and that will kind of govern what we're able to pass into our React component. And our props. Charles, do you have anything you want to say on props?
Yeah. So what we're doing is what Garrett's doing right now is he started to framework out the component that we're going to drop on the page. You notice it's not on the index; it's on this separate file. We're going to pull it in and drop it on the page. We're going to use some existing components that are out there in the Fluent library. We'll get into more detail later, like in a later session about more of the flexibility of modern Fluent React controls. But for today, we're just going to use a couple that are out there so you can see that happening in a full-fledged React control. The interface itself is how we're going to pass props into the control. Props are one of two different sort of main categorical areas of how we manage data in a React control. There are props and there's state. Props are immutable data elements that are passed down into the control from whatever it is that's hosting the control. That could be your index, or it could be another component, or a component in a component in a component in a component.
Yeah.
Right? You could be very deep, and the point is, at the point of the definition of this component, the data that's fed in, that's a prop. And a prop is always immutable. Now, that component itself, whatever it is, might need to manage data, might need to have things that are mutable, right? That it can update and change and maintain on its own. That's what state is for. So we have props, immutable data passed down into the component, and state, data that's managed and controlled inside the component. Yeah. So we've got a basic interface here that Garrett's written out, right? Our interface just includes the message, like some kind of
Yeah.
piece of text, a message that we're going to have coming in, as well as a callback function that'll let us send data back up, right? We're down in the component right now, and we want to be able to display some kind of a piece of text, a message, and give a user the ability to change that text, right? To update
Yep.
it and change things and feed that back up. So the message is the data coming down. The callback is us sending updates back up.
Yep. And so we've also got to go ahead and build out a functional component,
Yeah,
which this is kind of the newer way to build out a React component as if it were a function. Um,
that's right. Yeah, a lot of the times you'll see people sometimes you'll see people building React components as class components. Those are the two kinds. You have a class component and a function component. Class component is it's an older way of doing it. It's not that it doesn't work anymore. It still does. It's just that it's missing a lot of capabilities, namely
mhm.
React hooks, which are a fantastic way of controlling the re-rendering of your React control in a much more granular and intuitive way. So
Mhm.
these days, I think that everybody would really recommend you always do it in function components because there's a lot
Yeah.
more capability. But sometimes, if you're looking out at documentation online that maybe has been there for a few years, the old Fluent V1, um, like Fluent React V 8.2, the documentation there, everything still shows class components, even though
Mhm.
people don't really do that anymore.
Yeah. So we're gonna actually, Charles mentioned hooks. We're gonna actually dive in to a hook right here. So first up, one of the most common things you'll be using in React is actually state. And state is how you control, I mean, the state of the data in your component. So right now, we've got this statement right here that takes in the message from the props interface and then goes ahead and applies that to kind of makes a variable in a way um, that is we now call message, and then a function for set message, which is what you'll do whenever you need to change the message. So,
And again, as
um,
we were saying before, this is because props are immutable. We can't update the value of props.message here in our control. It can only
mhm,
come down to us. And so if we want to be able to maintain that value, we have to make our own in state. We're copying it
right,
over to state so that we have a variable we can be messing with. We can do things with.
yep, exactly. And I'll actually go ahead and we'll do an example of how we will use that variable. So we're using another React hook here, which is use effect, which is a function that will um, whenever a certain variable that is specified gets updated, or a piece of state, I should say, not variable, gets updated, then this will run. So I'll actually show you how we set this up. You'll use an arrow function here, and we'll just do something simple. So we'll say props.callback, and we'll provide it the argument of message. And so down here is where we actually begin to really work with state. So in this array, this is an array of the various pieces of state that you want to trigger the use effect here. Is that right, Charles?
Yeah, yeah, and not just state. You can also put props in that array too if you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
The point is, so a reactive control is a control that automatically re-renders as data evolves, right? As
Mm-hmm.
things change in your operating environment and you might want to present things differently, the control intelligently evaluates what has changed and re-renders content for you. So you don't need to write a million operations. We don't need to write a function that says any time that message changes, delete the line where we're currently displaying the message and then create a new HTML. No, we don't have to do that. We just say use the value of message and it knows anytime that updates to re-render. Our
Mm-hmm.
hook is just another way of doing it. It's a way of attaching to that event. So anytime that there's a change in the value of message, attach this event to it. Do
Mm-hmm.
this thing as well as what we're saying, and gives us some very granular control over what gets re-rendered and when. Because if you don't control it, you might be re-rendering more than you need to. And if you want to attach certain events to what happens in your data, this is kind of the ideal way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great explanation. And so next up, the last essential thing we need to do to make this a React component is actually return something called JSX, which is I guess at its core, it's just HTML inside your JavaScript. Um,
Yeah, yeah. It's
yeah,
a little
sort of,
hybrid. Yeah,
sort of, yeah.
it's
Um,
like JavaScript inside HTML inside JavaScript. It's a weird one. Yeah.
yeah, it's fun though. So we're gonna actually kind of gloss over a couple things here just to make it quick. Fluent Provider is kind of, as we mentioned before, a piece of that Microsoft Fluent framework, which we will be getting into in a future video.
Yeah. The Fluent
So that
provider allows you to sort of in bulk pass theming and other kinds of properties down to all of the Fluent controls that might sit inside of it. It's
hmm
just a quick shortcut way for us to make things look fluent, give it that signature light color with the blue and all of that.
yeah, exactly. And here's where we actually start to get into the meat of React here as well, is this onChange event in our input component. So we're using the input component coming from Fluent UI. But the OnChange event is very important for us because that's, whenever the text in the input changes, we want something to happen, right? So we'll go ahead and define our data here. So we'll do the event argument, which is going to be a type of any, the data argument, which is going to be input on change data that also comes from Fluent. So
And if you're getting lost about what's going in the signature here, don't worry. All this is in the documentation for
yeah,
Fluent 2 and Fluent React 9. You can just go there and it'll show you. Oh, here, I'm looking at the input component. I want to do something in the onChange event. It'll give you the signature. Oh, here you have an event and you have a data element, and here are your types. So
yeah. And then we're going to go ahead and use our set message, and we're going to go ahead and say data, which is the data that comes from the input on change, and say data dot value.
perfect.
And so that ought to.
Yeah. And before we move on, let's clarify. So OnChange now, and this is a prop that we're passing into the Fluent control. The Fluent component of input has a prop called OnChange, right? And we're going to
Mhm.
give it a function. So this is what I want you to do anytime there's an OnChange event. What I want you to do is set message to data.value. Set message we declared up at the beginning in that first hook. Const message set message equals react at use state. And set message is our little handy dandy function for updating our state in a very supported, this is the mainline way of doing it, right? So when
Mhm.
we call that function, it's going to update state for us. It's going to update specifically message in state.
Mhm.
Well, we've also attached a hook to the update of message, which is our react.use effect. So these things cascade, right? And we're supposed to trust the platform to handle all these things for us. So OnChange will set message. When message changes, we'll call back. And so that value, whatever you're typing into that box, should go all the way back up to the index anytime you hit a keystroke. With every keystroke, it should be going right back up.
Mhm. Yeah, another great explanation. And so we're actually going to make the jump back to our index.ts file. And we're going to start doing a little bit of work in here. So first off, we actually want to go ahead and bring in our component. Now, a lot of times VS Code will do this for you, but we're going to make sure we do it explicitly before we get too deep into things. So remember, we called it Hello World FC. And so we're going to bring that in. And so next thing you know, we got Hello World FC imported from Hello World, which is the TSX file over here. Now we're actually going to start seeing. It's not going to be super happy over here for a little bit on the harness testing harness, but we'll get there. So I hello world props as well, and so we have our props, and then we want to actually bring in a couple things from React real quick, um, namely React elements and create elements from React. And then finally, we want to go ahead and import the React DOM library, which is going to actually give us control over the DOM. So we've got all we need right here. We're going to go ahead and start updating our other things. We'll go ahead and we'll introduce a couple um, new private variables here. So we're going to do notify output change, which these are all things that come from the
From the
PCF
platform.
framework.
And I think
Yeah, from
we
the
went over
platform.
the notify output change and the get outputs in previous videos, but to recap on
Yeah,
those, notify output changed is a function that's passed down to us by the platform to say, hey, when you have data outputs, just call this to let us know, right? It's a convenient
mhm.
little way of saying to the platform, raising your hand in class and saying, I've got something. I got something to share.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do that as well here. So we're going to, yep,
Mm-hmm.
get that all set. And then we'll also define our callback function, which will get passed into the React props here. So
This is that
we'll make
React
it,
that callback that we declared in our interface in the component
yeah,
that said, hey,
so
we need
this
somewhere to
guy
send this
here.
data. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's this guy right here. And we'll do callback, pass it an argument, string type called message. We'll make it a void return, and then this dot message equals message. So that's setting the private variable from up here to whatever was passed back as a message. And then do this. We'll raise our hand, as Charles said, and say, hey, I got something. And so that's going to notify the platform that the output has changed. And then we're going to jump into update view, and we're going to start making some magic happen here. So we'll define our props, um, which we're grabbing the props interface that we had in our React component. And let's see, so the first one we've got is message.
Yeah.
And we'll just kind of give that a stock hello world. And then do our callback, which is going to be this dot callback. This is a little bit of a weird one. You've got to bind it to this.
Yeah, if you don't know what's going on there with that bind, it's just about the context where the JavaScript is evaluating. So this dot call, because our callback is going to be called from the component, but we want to make sure that when it executes, the definition of this is the this of index. So we bind to this so that we don't worry about losing context when it calls back.
Right. And so we're going to go ahead and now we'll actually bring in our React DOM and render. Do create elements and actually create a React element out of our hello world. And then we're going to pass in the props and we'll apply it to this dot container. And there we go. And then I think our final piece is we need to jump into get outputs, which is just below. And we have an output already, or a property called display text. And then we'll apply this dot message to that.
Yeah. So what we're doing now is now that value, as you type it in the box, is going to get. Remember the chain of events that's happening down the control. You type in the box. Each time you hit a keystroke, it's going to call the OnChange. OnChange is going to set state. Set state will fire the hook, and the hook will pass it back up to the callback. And now the callback will call the notify output change. The platform will call into get outputs, and that string will make it all the way back up. So if it's actually a Dataverse column that you've bound to, as you're typing into that React component, it's going to make it all the way back up to the column in the database table.
Yeah. Actually, I made a mistake. I put this inside this if statement, which it did not need to be. And
cool.
So yeah, we'll bring that back out. And it appears we're not actually showing our component here. So I wonder what's up with that. Oh, now here we go. It was just taking a second. So we currently have nothing. So I'll say hello.
You can see as
Charles.
Garrett is typing, look over on the right side right there next to the data inputs. It's showing up. So as he's typing, that chain of events I mentioned is firing. So that keystroke by keystroke, it's making it all the way back up to the executing context. The actual sheet itself. Yeah.
So, but we don't have anything actually reacting in our UI, and that's because I neglected one crucial piece here. So we're going to bring in the Fluent text component, and we're actually going to provide that the value of message that you can see it in here. So we'll go ahead and hit save, and let's see, that should update any second now. So it's got the stock message of hello world. We'll go ahead and change it up. You'll notice it's reacting in real time here, so re-rendering itself. And sure enough, we're going to go ahead and say thanks for coming. That's all we had to show today.
Good stuff, Garrett. Good stuff.
Yeah, and that's our video for today. So thanks for joining us today. We'll be back at you soon with more videos. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks.